wiring, a lot of the other little things have changed, and it will be kind of unrecognizable in a sense compared to everything else. So I do
We have to be able to launch these.
below the nose cone. So we've just basically in the show and tells just dissect that kind of stuff all the time and figure out where do these lines lead, where does it all go, and how does it all work. So yeah, thank you for that question, Aaron. Next question we have is from Jack Morton. So last time when we did the SN8 hop during landing phase, the flame turned green due to melting. What is the difference this time around? And so that brings back the question back to what we were talking about. The methane header tank was had low pressure on SN8. That was a cascading failure where you had the rightmost engine in the back. It turned off basically because it was very oxygen rich. And even the left engine was oxygen rich but kept going, and you could see green flames kind of coming out of it every once in a while. So it was basically already engine rich at that point. But when the right engine turned off, it ran into the other one, and then you could see the green flames coming out from there just consistently. So that's when you have very oxygen rich as well as engine rich, so to speak, where it's just pulling that copper out of the jacket lining of the engine bell. And between those two things, that engine was basically going to fail pretty soon if it could even last uh, longer at that point. It was basically going to go out, but it all was basically because of the methane header tank, and so it did sort of melt. So thank you for that, Jack.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. Um,
Um,
from Ranger Rockets. Does anyone know the cost of these test starships? Luckily, materials cost, is very low. It's just stainless steel. There's no crazy carbon, carbon fiber composites. But as for, a actual cost of materials and labor to build them, no, we do not know costs. You can kind of make back of the napkin math, guesstimates based on the weight of the stainless steel and what they want Raptor engines to eventually cost. But I mean, that would just be an absolute wag or sag, you know. So
I've come up with some ballparks of what one of these vehicles costs, and you have to spread the costs over how many they expect to produce. Elon says he wants to do about 1,000 of these, and the cost for R&D and everything else, like so at their own cost, I'm suspecting it's around $32 million per vehicle, with the just the three engines. You have to increase it up to about 39 million for I'm sorry, all six engines, and that's just for the Starship. Not doesn't include the Super Heavy booster because that's a separate cost. But that's just a ballpark that I put together. Um, so they have all of the stuff that's going into making the Raptors, and I think that's going to be the biggest cost overall. But once they're actually producing them, the costs get basically moved around, and yeah, it's kind of an interesting question. We've had a lot of people go through, and it's like, okay, how many people are working on site right now? Around 800 maybe, and that's for Boca Chica, and then there's additional places in McGregor, and additional people at Hawthorne, but we don't know exact numbers on Hawthorne because they are also, doing other things with Falcon, and then the same thing with McGregor. So it kind of changes depending on who's going in which project, and guessing around on some of those things. So Elon will be able to answer that one better than any of us could, though. But we suspect it's going to be still very much cheaper than any other rocket out there.
very much. So, question from Eric Richards.
He asks, how much weight can Starship return to orbit as payload? Can she return Hubble? 32,000 or 3,200 pounds of gold is worth 100 million USD. So,
Yes, she can return Hubble. Hubble would have to, the solar panels would have to be removed from, or sorry, the yeah, from a weight standpoint, she could return Hubble. We had talked about that. There's a lot of things
yeah.
that Starship could return. We even talked about returning the ISS, to go put it in the Smithsonian, and it could be disassembled. But from a weight standpoint, especially in coming back, which is an interesting thing, can it return more than it can take? If you launch the Starship, could it come back with a heavier payload than it could have launched into orbit?
As long as it's
Um,
refueled in orbit, yeah. It's just
yeah. So
the it's just the way that you do the crazy Elon, and how soon you do the kickflip and all of that stuff. Otherwise, you kind of go splat.
that being said, though, since it's got the heaviest lift capacity, there should be nothing in orbit that is less than it could have launched into orbit. So that's another interesting thought.
Question here from
Um,
Tesla on Mars. How much of the production process can or should be automated with those KUKA robots? And what is a reasonable production rate? Well, quite a bit of the process could be automated with the robot. However, they have found that some processes are much better done by hand. But we're seeing more and more of the KUKAs being used. One of the things that we're seeing it being used for is for mounting the studs to the windward side of the vehicle, for use for mounting the heat tiles to. So I suspect we'll see more of that. We're looking forward to seeing what all operations the KUKAs are going to be used for on the nose cone. We suspect that it'll be doing some welding, as well as
hey,
doing the studs there as well.
look what we have.
We have
Oh,
engine chill.
there we go.
Now
Yeah,
we're
we have
talking.
we really have it going now. So it looks like they decided to do some other testing in between. So they really did like vent the system hard. It was just coming out super slow, but they're going for it.
Yeah.
So we might see static fire just after 8. I wouldn't doubt with what SpaceX does. They like to push it to the last minute and then some.
So all of you people who put 8:03 as a launch as a static fire time, you win. You win the prize. So
Now, right now I am
So-
only seeing the two vents, but it might have the third going on as well. So
it's always the wind. The wind always messes with us because you can't always see, the third one. Is it just blowing straight back, behind Starship? So, question from Julian Cochet. Is there a minimum delay after a successful static fire for a rocket to be ready to and okay to go? Can a static fire be done just 24 hours before a launch? Yes. I don't know. We've seen it with last Starship, or sorry, the Hop, SN8's Hop was more than 24 hours before its last static fire, but I don't know of any reason why it couldn't be, other than just out of an abundance of caution to let them do all the checks that they want. As many checks as they need to be sure that that hop is ready to go, that there was no damage to the pad, to the engines from that static fire. So, but I don't know of any technical reason why they could not. Let's say if they did this now, there's no technical reason why they couldn't do the hop tomorrow, if everything else was in place.
Yeah, I think they could do the static fire and then allowing enough time in the window to get in there and do on-site inspection, check everything out, make sure we didn't have any engines fail or any damage in the area that needs to be repaired. So I would think that would be the main thing. You'd want to do the static fire, detank, make sure everything is safe in the area, then go in and do a really good physical inspection of the vehicle, and then proceed on. Could they do that within a 24-hour period? Yeah, but it's a little bit risky because you do not want to rush your inspection. You want to make sure you don't overlook something.
So the
All right.
next part about all of this, like once we actually have a fully utilized vehicle that does pretty much everything. So Aaron Berg asks a question: what SN do you think will be the first to do a 400-kilometer hop? So at that point, I think it's an actual hop. That would be somebody asked the same kind of question. Would it be a flight? But yeah. So,
Next
SNs.
question. Why does the live status? Why does the live status window not have 47 entries for when hop asked?
Yeah, that kind of gets spammed.
Only 47?
Yeah.
47. Yeah.
We got
There
some
we
more
go.
donations coming in through Super Chat that we might want to get to real quick because this may shut us down here before we may see hear a
Yeah.
siren.
Let's get through these here.
We got $20 from Roulette for Reddit. Onion App Store. Love this coverage. Excited for our space-bound future. Appreciate your efforts. Thank you very much. We've got $10 that came in from Don Rabottom. Thanks for getting better all the time. A great year ahead of us. We've got $5 Canadian from Ted S. Root beers for the mods for putting up with the win hop and scrub messages every 2 minutes.
Exactly.
$5
Only
from
47.
$5 from Little Rabbit. Loves hopping. Love that name. $11.41 from Jake Graff. Cool stuff. Here for the 1,000. And then we got $4.99 pounds from Chris Brown. Engine chills starting. Thanks, Chris. And then we got $5 again from Sasha. See that, friends? That is engine chill. Thank you all. Thank you all for your donations. Much, much, much appreciated.
That's awesome. That's how you know it's engine chill.
And now I've got a drone
real
going
frosty
around
real
too.
quick,
So it's frosted. We have a drone. We have engine chill. So we're getting really close. I usually like to park that on the backside watching the static fire.
really love watching this.
And now I'm seeing the cars going off. We've got the siren, so yeah, we've got less than 10 minutes before an attempted static fire.
So is it going to be 10 minutes this time, or is it going to be 4?
I was going to say, I think we could wrap it up, not take the risk of it being 4. So it's up to him. What do you think, Thomas?
I got like 30 seconds before I think we should book it here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Wolfenstein, thank you for the $10. Says launch already. Hopefully not right now. If it launches right now, bad things happened. But yeah, hopefully very soon. So
Cylon, Cylon N8, he said, push the button. The button's about to be pushed. So, thank you for all the donations here coming in. We've got, I think everybody else. Did we get Connor K in here as well?
No, we did not.
Okay, so Connor K donated $5. Says made it home in time for static fire. I thought I missed it. So happy right now. I want you all to vote on which SN you will think be the first full stack. So that would be interesting for which booster would probably go with that as well.
And
I'd go with
17,
thanks $10.
17 or 18.
yeah, 17, 18, yeah. I would go 15, but maybe.
$10 from Wolfenstein. Launch already. Thank you very much for your donation.
All right. And at this point, I'm going to suggest to each of you hit that thumbs up. Also, if you can, subscribe or hit the join. We're going to go ahead and mute from here and be back after the static fire here in a little bit. So we'll see you guys later.
Thank you, everybody. Talk to you in a bit.
We have seen looks like a complete abort at 205, or sorry, 805. So far, it's basically double vent. It was right when we were expecting to see a static fire. So that basically means that there is something going on with the the system here. Any quick guesses on what you guys think that would be that caused
Um,
the abort?
no, I mean, this was a little bit different. Like I said, it looked like they recycled at some point, or it took longer than it should have. So I would say something. I'm hoping something just with their testing procedure that didn't go as expected. But there was no pre-burner light, there was no engine light of any kind. So hopefully
Yeah,
something they can just fix overnight and come back again and try tomorrow.
yeah. So I'm looking at the very tip of the nose cone. It's very frosty. So is the LOX tank, and a bit of the methane tank. I'm suspecting that they are going for this entire testing was a kind of a repeat. We saw something similar the other day where they were doing a header tank test, and they've gone to the helium option, and maybe they're realizing, okay, we're doing static fire off the header tanks, and now they're having some issue because of the helium. It's too much pressure, too hot, or something going on. So they're working with what they have and having some issues there. But oh, man, it's quite it's quite just hard to see that when there's an abort like this. We do have quite a few questions that people have asked. We're gonna go through and see if we can answer about three questions each, and then wrap up for tonight, since they have exceeded their testing window and we don't see any new options for extending it at this point.
Yeah, the road closure is still only till 8 p.m. So they have not, at least been updated on the website. So, um,
I'm going to go for the first question here from Jack Morton. Asks, so Starship has CH4 locks on both the first and second stage, while New Glenn is CH4 locks on first, but LH2 and locks on second stage. Advantages and disadvantages. So he's talking about a basically a hydrogen for use of the New Glenn system. The second stage, it's more efficient to go with hydrogen. So basically liquid hydrogen he's talking about, and it is just more efficient overall typically. However, there is a nice part with Starship. It's using the same fuel for both, so you have the same engines for both, and you don't have to deal with a lot more ground support equipment and issues with the helium leaking. That's something they're going to have to deal with a lot with the New Glenn, is helium leaking out of the fuel tanks. So it's not a good position to be in when you're about to launch and your helium's leaking out and creating some gas bubbles somewhere around or beneath the rocket that you were not expecting, and you can have a bit of a problem with because of that.
very much so. KM asked, is this a scaled version of Starship? There will need to be some modifications, obviously, if this thing is supposed to fly people to Mars. It's not a scaled version in terms of size. This is essentially an empty Starship, though. Other than the fuel tanks and the fuel system and the engines, there is nothing else inside of it. So the entire nose section, which is basically the cone plus about 4 or 5 rings down, is where both cargo and people would be when Starship goes to Mars or the Moon, or even just into orbit with people in it. The first couple dozen of Starships will be these type plus then cargo variants. So they will not have crew quarters, they will not have life support systems. They will strictly be for getting cargo to and from the Moon or Mars or ISS or the Lunar Gateway, anything like that. So probably within a couple of years, they will start making the crewed version of it, which will have life support systems, and yes, it will be very heavily modified. From the outside, though, the only major modifications that'll be come up are likely going to be slight changes in the shape of the fins, and wings, flings and flaps, as well as the heat tiles that are going to be put on the windward side of it. Shape, how many, how they'll attach them, and everything like that. The addition of the 3 vacuum raptors, so it'll have 6 raptors total. But said from the outside, it's relatively minor changes that'll happen to this compared to the, if you want to call it, the production one that'll fly.
All right, Chris, what question do you want to go for here?
We've got a really good one here from American Kid 778. Do you think SpaceX could launch from a man-made island? I would think so. Some of what I've seen in the past and read up on, some of the man-made islands that they've been talking about are going to be pretty big. So I don't see why not. I know he was talking about potentially purchasing a used oil platform as the beginning of one. They're fairly large, and I've seen a lot of renderings of some pretty decent sized places. So I think a man-made island would probably be a good way of doing it. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I've seen some really cool renderings for hexagon-shaped platforms. They're much more stable at sea. They're huge. You could put skyscrapers on them, just depending on how many you have. So the bigger it is, the more stable it is, and it will still deal with the tidal waves. And the skyscrapers won't go beyond maybe a 14-story building, but still, that's pretty tall for being out in the middle of the ocean. And yeah, they interlock together. There's so many good options about that. However, it's really expensive. You're talking trillions of dollars for let's say, a city. And you'd have to have, let's say, a sea launch platform that would be able to attach and detach from something like this because, yeah, there is too much noise, too much vibration, everything else. So you'd have to have that either as a separate little colony that is for launching starships. But yeah, expensive-wise, it's just too much for me. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, we've talked about sea platforms, oil derricks, things like that. When you say man-made island, I feel like it implies that there would be people on it, when it launched. And as you said, the noise and vibration alone would prohibit that from anybody being on, any kind of man-made island, being within, a couple miles of the launch site. We've had that question a lot. Why can't you be closer? The sound pressure waves would kill you if you were, next to a super heavy when it launched. So it would not be good. I think the oil derrick, type platform is completely sufficient. The biggest problem with all of them is how do you get something the size of a 12-story building or bigger, with the full stack? How do you get it there? These do not travel real well. You can't just throw them on the back of a truck and drive it down the road or whatever. So they're making plans here to be able to get them onto ships, of some kind, to take them out to offshore platforms, of some kind. But when I think man-made island, I think of Dubai. I think of the, what Dubai did with building actual, islands out in the ocean and building the palm tree
Island, bit of sand, yeah.
Islands, yeah, that takes very specific geographic areas and very specific things, and I don't know that you could launch rockets from them. It's one thing to build a little, one-bedroom house on one. It's a whole nother to launch the largest rocket in the world from one. So I don't know how that would handle. So,
all right, I've got a question from Fred Jones that I like the look of. So Locke's head is on the skin of the cone, so it gets heat from entry and air pressure, while the methane is chilled between the tanks. Could the methane tank be shifted to the side for heat transfer for more pressure? So that way they're basically on their reentry. It sounds like you're wanting to move the methane header tank so it's touching the very side of the vehicle and heating up. But the problem is that the heat shield is also protecting the methane header tank, and that's not the main issue. Is that the header tank doesn't just have enough pressure because of heat or whatnot. It's having pressure issues overall. It sounds like, based off of what Elon is doing right now with the helium option. It's all about pressure, not temperature. Temperature is a part of that, but you have anything on add to that, Jeff?
No, I think that's right. If it was just if it was just a temperature problem, you could just stop venting it. It will gain enough pressure from that. Um, but I think it's how they control that pressure, and more specifically, when they need it to be higher, it's a very small window. During that crazy Elon when they during the landing when they light those engines again. Like I said, it's not just about the temperature right then. It's about temperature or pressure overall throughout the entire time. Which, and so the helium thing, from how I read it, it's a temporary fix. They don't know how to fix it on a permanent basis. They know helium will work for right now. They would like it to be, a completely self-contained, autogenous system. But since they don't have that right now, and they're not going to stop testing because of that relatively small problem, they'll say, you know what, use helium. That'll solve the problem for right now until we find a more permanent solution that does not require helium, because they can't take helium to Mars and reproduce it there, and nor would they want to. So they need to use the methane and oxygen that comes with the Starship.